Love is supposed to lift you up, not tear you down. When 44-year-old Rebecca Chen stepped onto the Family Feud stage in November 2024, she was already battling insecurities about her appearance after gaining weight following a medical condition. What her husband, Robert, said to her on live television in front of millions of viewers would cross a line that should never be crossed in any marriage. The moment Harvey heard those cruel words, he did something that reminded everyone watching why dignity and respect matter more than any game show prize. Before we show you what happened when one man's thoughtless cruelty met one host's unwavering commitment to decency, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to our channel, because this story will show you the power of standing up for someone who cannot stand up for themselves in that moment. The Family Feud studio buzzed with its usual energy that Thursday afternoon. The Chen family from Sacramento, California, faced off against the Williams family from Arizona. Everything seemed normal as the families took their positions on stage. Rebecca Chen stood with her husband Robert, their adult son Marcus, and her sister Diana. They had prepared for weeks, turning their living room into a Family Feud practice arena. But no amount of preparation could have readied Rebecca for what was about to happen when her husband decided that humiliating her publicly was somehow acceptable. Rebecca Chen had spent the last 2 years fighting a battle that millions of Americans face but few people truly understand. At 44 years old, she had been diagnosed with hypothyroidism, a condition where the thyroid gland does not produce enough hormones to regulate metabolism. Despite eating carefully and exercising regularly, Rebecca had gained 60 pounds over the course of 18 months. The weight gain had been devastating for her self-esteem, even though it was caused by a medical condition largely beyond her control. Before her diagnosis, Rebecca had been an avid runner. She had completed 3 marathons and was proud of her athletic achievements. She worked as a physical therapist, helping others recover from injuries and regain their strength and mobility. Her patients loved her because she understood the frustration of a body that would not cooperate with what the mind wanted it to do. She brought empathy and patience to her work, qualities that came from her own struggles. The medication Rebecca took for her thyroid condition helped somewhat, but weight loss remained difficult. Her endocrinologist had explained that her metabolism was now fundamentally different than it had been before the condition developed. She would have to work twice as hard to maintain a healthy weight, and even then she might never return to her pre-diagnosis size. Rebecca had tried to accept this new reality, but it was hard. She missed running without her knees hurting. She missed fitting into her favorite clothes. She missed feeling comfortable in her own skin. Robert Chen, also 44, worked as a financial advisor. He was successful in his career and took pride in maintaining his own fitness through regular gym sessions and careful attention to his diet. In the early years of their 20-year marriage, he and Rebecca had been workout partners, running together on weekends and encouraging each other to stay healthy. But when Rebecca's thyroid condition developed and the weight gain began, Robert's support had gradually transformed into criticism. At first, his comments had been subtle suggestions that perhaps Rebecca should try harder with her diet or exercise more frequently. When she explained that her doctor had told her the weight gain was largely due to her medical condition, Robert had seemed skeptical. He made comments about other people with thyroid conditions who had managed to stay thin, implying that Rebecca simply was not trying hard enough. Over time, his remarks became more pointed and more hurtful. Their son Marcus, now 22 and finishing college, had watched his father's treatment of his mother with growing concern. He had tried to talk to his father about being more supportive, but Robert had brushed off these conversations. He claimed he was just trying to motivate Rebecca to be healthier, not understanding that his constant criticism was doing the opposite. Rebecca's sister Diana, who was also part of the Family Feud team, had been furious about how Robert treated Rebecca. She had witnessed countless moments where Robert made cutting remarks about Rebecca's weight in front of family members, at restaurants, and during social gatherings. Diana had urged Rebecca to stand up for herself or consider whether this marriage was healthy for her. But Rebecca, who believed deeply in her marriage vows and kept hoping Robert would return to being the supportive partner he had once been, had stayed and endured. The opportunity to appear on Family Feud had actually been Rebecca's idea. She had hoped that doing something fun as a family might help remind Robert of the partnership they used to have. She had bought a new outfit for the show, something that made her feel as confident as possible given her complicated feelings about her body. She had practiced her answers, studied the show, and tried to approach the experience with optimism. What Rebecca did not know was that the stress of being on television and the competitive nature of the game would bring out the worst in her husband rather than the best. The game began well enough. The Chen family won the opening round, with Marcus giving a strong answer about popular vacation destinations. Steve Harvey, as always, kept the energy positive and encouraging. He made gentle jokes with all the family members, including commenting that Rebecca had a warm smile that lit up the stage. Rebecca had blushed at the compliment, unused to receiving such kindness about her appearance. The game progressed through several rounds. The Chen family was competitive but not dominating. They had some answers on the board and some that were not, which was typical for Family Feud. Throughout the game, Robert had been visibly tense, clearly taking the competition very seriously. Each time someone gave an answer that was not on the board, he would grimace or shake his head in frustration. Then came a question that would trigger everything. Steve Harvey asked, "Name something people do to try to lose weight." It was Rebecca's turn at the buzzer. She buzzed in quickly, having anticipated this type of question during their family practice sessions. Her answer was confident and immediate. "Join a gym." The answer was on the board. It was the number 3 answer with 22 points. The audience applauded, and Rebecca smiled, pleased that she had contributed points to her family's score. It was a moment of success, a moment where she should have felt proud. But Robert's reaction destroyed that moment completely. As Rebecca stepped back from the buzzer, Robert leaned toward her and said, loud enough for the microphones to pick up clearly, "Well, you would know all about that, wouldn't you? Too bad knowing about it and actually doing it are two different things." The words landed like a physical blow. Rebecca's face went white, then red. Her eyes immediately filled with tears. The smile that had been there just seconds ago vanished, replaced by an expression of pure humiliation and pain. The studio audience gasped audibly. Several people in the front rows could be heard saying, "Oh no," and "That's terrible." Steve Harvey, who had been walking toward the board to continue the game, stopped mid-step. He turned slowly, his expression shifting from game show host to someone who had just witnessed something deeply wrong. He looked at Robert, then at Rebecca, who was clearly trying not to cry on camera. Diana, Rebecca's sister, immediately moved to Rebecca's side and put her arm around her. She shot Robert a look of absolute fury. Marcus, their son, looked torn between comforting his mother and confronting his father. He settled for moving closer to Rebecca, creating a physical barrier between his parents. Steve Harvey made a decision in that moment. He walked away from the game board and moved directly toward the Chen family. His expression was serious, his trademark humor completely absent. "Hold up," he said firmly. "We need to stop right here." The production staff looked uncertain, but Steve's authority on his own show was absolute. He signaled for them to pause taping. This was no longer about a game. This was about dignity, about respect, and about a man who had just publicly degraded his wife on national television. "Robert," Steve said, his voice calm but with an edge of steel underneath. "What did you just say to your wife?" Robert, seeming to realize that the room's energy had shifted dramatically, tried to backtrack. "It was just a joke, Steve. We joke around like that all the time." Rebecca's head snapped up at that lie. "No, we don't," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "That's not a joke, Robert. That's just you being cruel like you have been for 2 years. The audience was completely silent now. This had become something much more serious than a thoughtless comment. This was a window into a pattern of behavior, into a dynamic that had been causing pain for a long time. Steve Harvey looked at Rebecca with genuine compassion. Then he turned back to Robert, and his expression hardened. "Brother, let me tell you something. That was not a joke. Jokes are supposed to be funny. Jokes are supposed to make people laugh. What you just did was humiliate your wife in front of millions of people. You made a cruel comment about her weight on national television. There is nothing funny about that." Robert opened his mouth to respond, but Steve raised his hand to stop him. "I'm not finished," Steve said. "Before you try to defend yourself or make more excuses, I want you to look at your wife. Really look at her. Look at what your words just did to her." Robert reluctantly turned to face Rebecca, who was crying openly now, no longer trying to hide her tears. The pain on her face was evident to everyone in the studio and everyone who would eventually watch this episode. "That's what your joke did," Steve said quietly. "That's the result of your words. Now I need to understand something. Why would you think it was acceptable to say something like that to the woman you married, the woman you supposedly love?" Robert stammered. She knows I want her to be healthy. I'm worried about her health." "Stop," Steve interrupted, his voice sharp. "Don't hide cruelty behind fake concern. If you were really worried about her health, you would support her, encourage her, help her. You wouldn't mock her on television. You wouldn't use her struggles as ammunition to hurt her." Rebecca spoke up, her voice stronger now despite her tears. "Steve, you should know something. I have a thyroid condition. I've gained weight because my body doesn't work the way it used to. I see doctors. I take medication. I do everything I'm supposed to do." But Robert doesn't believe me. He thinks I'm just making excuses. He thinks if I just tried harder, I would look the way I used to. Steve's expression shifted from anger to deep compassion. He understood immediately what Rebecca was dealing with. Ma'am, first of all, thank you for sharing that. Second, I want you to know that your weight does not define your worth. Your medical condition is not your fault, and your husband's cruelty is not something you deserve or should have to tolerate. And back to Robert. Do you understand what you've been doing to her? She has a medical condition that is already difficult to deal with physically and emotionally. And instead of being her partner, her support, her safe place, you've been making her feel worse. You've been adding emotional pain on top of physical challenges. The audience began to applaud, showing their support for Rebecca and their disapproval of Robert's behavior. Steve let the applause continue for a moment, then raised his hand for quiet. I want to tell you something about marriage, Steve continued, addressing Robert directly but also speaking to everyone watching. When you marry someone, you make a promise to love them in sickness and in health. That doesn't just mean when they have the flu. It means when their body changes, when they face medical challenges, when they don't look the same as they did on your wedding day. That's what in sickness and in health actually means. Steve paused, letting his words sink in. And Rebecca, I want to say something to you. You deserve a husband who sees you as beautiful regardless of your size. You deserve a partner who supports you through medical challenges instead of using them against you. You deserve respect, always. Rebecca was crying harder now, but these were different tears. For the first time in 2 years, someone was validating her feelings. Someone was telling her that she was not being too sensitive, that Robert's treatment of her was genuinely wrong. Diana, Rebecca's sister, spoke up. Steve, thank you for saying that. I've been telling her the same thing for 2 years. She deserves so much better than how he treats her. Marcus, their son, also found his voice. Dad, what you just did was wrong. Mom has been struggling, and instead of helping her, you've been making everything harder. I'm ashamed of how you've been treating her. Robert's face crumbled. Being called out by his own son, in addition to Steve Harvey and the entire studio audience, seemed to finally break through his defenses. I didn't realize how bad it had gotten. I thought I was helping. I thought if I pushed her enough, she would. Would what? Steve interjected. Magically cure a medical condition through shame? That's not how thyroid disease works, brother. That's not how anything works. Shame doesn't motivate people. It destroys them. Steve's tone softened slightly, shifting from confrontation to teaching. Robert, I don't know what made you think that criticizing your wife's appearance was acceptable. Maybe you're struggling with your own fears about health and aging. Maybe you're dealing with issues you haven't addressed. But whatever your reasons, the result is that you've been hurting someone who deserves your love and support. He continued, Here's what I know about real love. Real love doesn't have conditions based on dress size. Real love doesn't include cruelty disguised as concern. Real love means supporting your partner through challenges, not making those challenges harder by adding emotional abuse on top of physical struggles. The words, emotional abuse, hung in the air. Robert looked shocked to hear his behavior described that way, but several people in the audience were nodding in agreement. What Robert had been doing to Rebecca for 2 years was indeed a form of emotional abuse, whether he had intended it that way or not. Steve made another decision. We're going to take a break from this game. Robert, you and I are going to have a private conversation. Rebecca, I want you to know that you don't have to participate in this game if you don't want to. You've been through enough today. But Rebecca surprised everyone. She wiped her tears and stood up straighter. No, she said firmly. I want to finish. I want to show my son and my sister and everyone watching that I'm not going to let Robert's cruelty stop me from living my life. I want to finish this game. The audience erupted in applause and stood to give Rebecca a standing ovation. Steve Harvey smiled at her with genuine admiration. Ma'am, that's strength, that's courage, and that's the spirit of someone who knows her own worth. The game resumed, but the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. Rebecca played with a new confidence, standing tall despite her tears. When she gave answers, the audience cheered extra loudly, showing their support. Robert remained quiet for the rest of the game, clearly processing everything that had happened. The Chen family won their game and advanced to fast money. Rebecca chose to go first, wanting to prove to herself that she could succeed despite the emotional turmoil. She scored 142 points, and when she finished, Steve Harvey hugged her and said quietly, so only the microphones picked it up, "You're amazing. Don't let anyone make you forget that." Marcus played the second half of Fast Money, dedicated his performance to his mother, and scored enough points to win the $20,000 prize. But the money felt secondary to everything else that had occurred. After the taping ended, Steve Harvey asked if the Chen family would stay for a private conversation. With cameras off, he spent an hour talking with them about marriage, respect, body image, and the importance of getting professional help. He gave Rebecca contact information for therapists who specialized in helping people recover from emotional abuse in relationships. He also gave Robert the number for counselors who worked with men on changing harmful relationship patterns. Steve was frank with Robert in that private conversation. He told him that what he had done to Rebecca was unacceptable, and that if he truly loved his wife, he needed to commit to fundamental change. He also told Rebecca that she had every right to insist on couples counseling as a condition of staying in the marriage, and that leaving would be completely justified if Robert refused to change. When the episode aired 8 weeks later, the response was immediate and overwhelming. The clip of Steve Harvey defending Rebecca and calling out Robert's cruelty went viral within hours. It sparked a national conversation about body shaming, medical conditions that cause weight gain, and emotional abuse in marriages. Thousands of women shared their own stories of being criticized by partners about their weight. Many described similar situations where medical conditions, pregnancies, medications, or natural aging had changed their bodies, and their partners had responded with cruelty rather than compassion. The hashtag #StandWithRebecca trended on social media for 3 days. Medical professionals, particularly endocrinologists who treat thyroid conditions, praised the episode for bringing attention to how medical conditions can affect weight and why patients need support rather than judgment. Several doctors recorded videos explaining hypothyroidism and other conditions that impact metabolism, helping to educate the public about why telling someone to just exercise more is not always realistic or helpful advice. Body positivity advocates also celebrated the episode, noting that Steve Harvey's defense of Rebecca sent a powerful message that people deserve respect regardless of their size. They emphasized that while Rebecca's weight gain was due to a medical condition, people should not have to have a medical excuse to be treated with dignity. Everyone deserves respect in their bodies, period. 3 months after the episode aired, the Chen family released a statement. Rebecca and Robert were separated. Robert had moved out of their family home and was living in an apartment while attending intensive therapy to address his behavior patterns. Rebecca was also in therapy, working through 2 years of emotional damage and rebuilding her self-esteem. Marcus reported that he was maintaining relationships with both parents, but had made it clear to his father that reconciliation with Rebecca would require profound and sustained change, not just apologies. He also shared that seeing his father's behavior called out so publicly had made him examine his own attitudes and behaviors, wanting to ensure he never treated a partner the way his father had treated his mother. 6 months after the episode aired, Rebecca did an interview with a major women's magazine. She spoke candidly about her experience on Family Feud and what had happened since. She shared that the public nature of Robert's cruelty, while initially humiliating, had ultimately been liberating. It had forced her to stop making excuses for his behavior and to recognize that what she had been tolerating was genuinely harmful. Rebecca also talked about her health journey. With the support of her medical team and a therapist who specialized in chronic illness, she had stopped defining her worth by her weight. She focused instead on what her body could do, on managing her thyroid condition effectively, and on treating herself with the kindness Robert had failed to show her. She had returned to physical therapy work with renewed empathy for patients struggling with their own body changes and limitations. The interview included photos of Rebecca looking confident and happy. The magazine noted that while some readers might focus on whether she had lost weight, the real transformation was visible in her eyes and smile. She looked like someone who had reclaimed her own sense of worth. Robert also gave an interview, though his was focused on accountability rather than redemption. He spoke honestly about how his own insecurities about aging and his obsession with fitness had made him cruel to Rebecca. He acknowledged that he had caused real harm and that simple apologies were not enough. He was doing intensive work with therapists to understand why he had behaved so badly and to change fundamental thought patterns about worth, appearance, and what it means to be a supportive partner. 1 year after the episode aired, Steve Harvey invited Rebecca back to Family Feud for a special segment. She appeared without Robert, accompanied instead by Diana and Marcus and several friends who had supported her through the difficult year. When she walked onto the stage, she received a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Steve Harvey hugged her warmly before they sat down to talk about her journey. Rebecca shared that she was thriving. She had started a blog about living with thyroid conditions, providing support and resources for others facing similar challenges. She had also become an advocate for people experiencing emotional abuse, speaking about the importance of recognizing harmful patterns and setting boundaries. Rebecca revealed that she and Robert were still separated and that she had not made a decision about whether to pursue divorce or reconciliation. She emphasized that any potential reconciliation would require Robert to demonstrate sustained change over years, not months. She had learned that she did not need to rush into any decision and that her own well-being needed to be her priority. Steve applauded her for taking that stance. "You're showing people what self-respect looks like," he said. "You're showing them that love should never require you to accept cruelty. And you're showing them that it's okay to take all the time you need to make decisions about your own life." The segment also featured testimonials from women whose lives had been changed by watching Rebecca's story. One woman shared that seeing Steve Harvey defend Rebecca had given her the courage to leave her own emotionally abusive marriage. Another explained that the episode had helped her recognize weight-related criticism from her partner as a serious problem that needed to be addressed, leading them to successful couples counseling. A third woman said that watching Rebecca stand tall and finish the game despite her pain had inspired her to stop hiding from life due to body image issues. Medical professionals who had worked with Rebecca appeared on the segment to discuss thyroid conditions and the importance of compassionate support for people dealing with medical challenges. They emphasized that Robert's behavior had likely made Rebecca's condition harder to manage, as stress and emotional trauma can negatively impact thyroid function and overall health. 2 years after the original episode, a follow-up documentary was produced about the lasting impact of the husband shames wife's weight moment. The documentary revealed that the episode had become required viewing in several counseling programs, training therapists to recognize and address emotional abuse. Marriage counselors reported using the clip to help clients understand the difference between supportive communication and harmful criticism. The documentary also tracked how the episode had influenced social media conversations about body image and relationships. Research showed that after the episode aired, there was a significant increase in online discussions about the importance of supporting partners through medical challenges and body changes. The episode had helped shift cultural conversations about weight, moving away from individual blame and toward recognition of complex factors including medical conditions, medications, and genetics. Rebecca appeared in the documentary looking confident and peaceful. She shared that while the Family Feud experience had been painful, it had ultimately set her free from a dynamic that was slowly destroying her sense of self-worth. She had learned that she could not control how others treated her, but she could control whether she accepted that treatment. The documentary revealed that Rebecca and Robert had ultimately divorced. Robert had done substantial therapeutic work and had apologized sincerely for his behavior, but Rebecca had decided that too much damage had been done to rebuild the marriage. They maintained a civil relationship for Marcus's sake, but Rebecca had chosen to move forward with her life rather than return to a relationship that had caused her so much pain. Rebecca had also found new love with someone who valued and respected her exactly as she was. The documentary showed her in a healthy, supportive relationship where her partner celebrated her strength, supported her health journey without criticism, and treated her with consistent kindness and respect. 3 years after the episode, Rebecca was invited to speak at medical conferences about the patient experience of living with thyroid conditions. She emphasized the importance of healthcare providers recognizing the emotional and psychological impacts of conditions that cause weight changes and helping patients navigate relationships where partners might not be supportive. Steve Harvey continued to reference Rebecca's story in his relationship, advice segments, and books. He used her experience to teach about the importance of respect in marriage, the damage caused by body shaming, and the necessity of supporting partners through medical challenges. He often said that pausing the game to address Robert's cruelty was one of the most important decisions he had made in his television career. The episode became a cultural touchstone, referenced in articles about body image, emotional abuse, medical conditions, and relationship dynamics. Psychology professors used it as a teaching tool to help students understand how public accountability can sometimes break through denial and force necessary change. Women's advocacy groups cited it as an example of how media figures can use their platform to stand up for dignity and respect. As this story concludes, it is essential to recognize that Rebecca's journey represents millions of people who face criticism and cruelty about their bodies from the people who are supposed to love them most. Her courage in finishing the game, in speaking her truth, and in ultimately prioritizing her own well-being over a harmful marriage, has inspired countless others to recognize their own worth and demand better treatment. Before you leave this video, make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss stories that matter. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that they deserve respect regardless of their size, their medical conditions, or any other aspect of their appearance. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts on body shaming in relationships and how we can support people who are facing these challenges. Your engagement helps us continue bringing you powerful stories that spark important conversations. The lesson from Chen's story is clear and uncompromising. Cruelty about someone's body is never acceptable, especially from someone who claims to love them. Medical conditions that cause weight changes are real and deserve compassion, not criticism. And self-respect sometimes means walking away from relationships where respect is consistently absent, even after 20 years together. This is what happens when someone's pain is witnessed and validated by someone with the courage to call out wrong behavior. This is what happens when a woman chooses her own dignity over a relationship that diminishes her. And this is what happens when a single moment on a game show becomes a catalyst for personal transformation and cultural conversation. Chen will always remember the day her husband shamed her weight on Family Feud. But she will also remember it as the day she started reclaiming her power, her worth, and her life.